Kia ora, hello. It's Wednesday, the 2nd of April. I'm Philip Duncan. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get into the forecast. There's a lot to talk about. We've got this storm out in the Tasman Sea. Now, this is dropping southwards, but the heaviest rain and the strongest winds, they'll be moving in across the country over the next couple of days. I'll explain how that wind is setting up in a moment. The storm itself is dropping down towards the Southern Ocean area. It's going to move away from the country over the next few days, but it ushers in this new autumn weather pattern, which has kind of been absent in some parts of the country, and certainly the top of the country where we've got drought and extremely dry conditions. So we'll try and break it all down for you. Let's kick off with the wind and air pressure map. So the storm very clearly can be seen out here in the middle of the Tasman, the southern part of it. A big high pressure zone east of New Zealand is part of the reason why we've got wind and rain on the way, because this high pressure zone is actually expanding out to our east. And as it does so, it goes up into the subtropics, curves that around, feeds it into that low. That's why you can see that blue shading sort of shows all the moisture in the atmosphere being sucked down into that low pressure zone. That's the area where the rain will be moving in and across the country. So a few moving parts to it, fair bit of low pressure up here around Queensland as well. So let's have a look at the wind. So I said yesterday that the wind is broken into two pieces. You've got the gale force winds around the storm itself. Then you've got the secondary area, that's the squash zone. What's a squash zone? Halfway between a low and a high. You've got this windy weather in between the two, and it's a straight line. It just goes from one direction to the other, and that's what we're seeing here, a windy nor'easter starting to kick in. But let's animate this now, and as we go through the timestamp here, from lunchtime today, you'll see the storm itself tracking southwards, but this other area of wind, the squash zone, that's the main part that moves over the country over the next couple of days as that storm churns southwards. So yes, a bit of wind from the storm itself for some of you in the South Island, but much of that wind that's crossing the country is kind of the halfway mark between the high pressure and low pressure. 7-day rainfall, departure from normal. Blue means it's wetter than usual for early April. So good to see blue coming in to the driest parts of the country, but the northwest corner of the South Island, highest risk for slips and flooding over the next few days. And this rain band, as it moves in off the Tasman Sea, isolated pockets of heavy rain in there as well. So that means some rainfall totals here and there may break and go above what is forecast as that all starts to move on through. It's kind of lumpy as it does so. And you can see that right here, the lumpy downpours up here in the orange, yellow, green sort of shaded areas. Nelson area, most exposed as we go through into Wednesday afternoon. Heavier falls along the west coast. And along with that, you've got those windy conditions. You've got the storm winds right here in the lower South Island. And then you've got the squash zone winds in the middle here coming through from the top of the country into sort of the upper South Island. And as we go through Thursday, that all drifts slowly eastwards into other regions. So it might become windier for you either on Thursday night or even overnight going into Friday. Here is overnight Thursday. So going into Friday, 1 o'clock in the morning on Friday, just past midnight, the storm south of the country. Windy weather and rain around Fiordland and Westland as a result of that storm. Windy-ish for those of you in the east, nothing too major I don't think, but stronger winds come into the top of the South Island along with that very heavy rain from the Nelson area right over towards Farewell Spit and down to about Westport. That's the corner, seeing some very heavy rain as we go through into Thursday night and into Friday itself. And then the next burst of wind and rain up here at the top of the country, that's moving in around Northland and Auckland and getting into Waikato and Coromandel. The more northerly flow sometimes isn't quite as windy as when it's a northeasterly. A very slight difference between the two. Places like Auckland, nor'easters can cause power cuts. A northeasterly, only a slight difference, can be a lot calmer. So we'll just see how that shapes up, but certainly windy weather coming through for the top of the country as we go in towards the next couple of days. Now to the end of Friday. Heavy rain still around the Nelson region, the whole northwest corner of the South Island, not just Nelson itself. Taranaki, Mount Taranaki in particular, and you see these sort of heavier falls moving in out of Auckland into Waikato, over into the Bay of Plenty area, Central Plateau. Most of it falls apart as it comes into these eastern areas along with that windy nor'wester, which will also ease back for many places as we go towards the end of the day. So pockets of heavy rain as we go through the next couple of days. The northwest corner of the South Island fairly exposed, Mount Taranaki as well. But like I say, other parts of the top of the North Island may also see some heavier falls. At the other end of the country, the storm moves away. Southerly winds start to come on through, but clearly still pretty wet along the western side there. So into the weekend, well, here is the storm, well southeast of Dunedin, the cold front clearing away from the country, quite clearly there. So now we're into a traditional autumn setup, southwesterlies or westerly winds blowing through, and a few showers here and there, nothing too major on the way on Saturday. By Sunday, the next burst of weather comes in. Two things here to look at. We'll start with the smaller feature, but this is an important one. A burst of showers comes back. This is really good. Dry drought regions, 1 or 2 days of rain is great, but if you don't get follow-up rain, it doesn't take long to go back to where you were. So getting follow-up rain, even if it's just another 5, 10, 15 millimeters, will be very welcome for those drought and dry zones as it moves through, and the gardens and the gardeners and the native bush and the birds and all that kind of stuff. So this is good weather for us to be getting. West to northwest winds coming through for most places, but clearly this storm is the main feature. Huge storm, 939 hectopascals. That is very low air pressure, quite a major system down there well south of us. But that's the reason why Tasmania's got a burst of autumn weather with a temperature drop. We're not so affected by it. That storm's a long way south from us. So it looks dramatic, but it may not actually do too much other than flicking up some of this weather. And so by Monday of next week, that storm's circling Antarctica. It's gone off the map. Now we've got a new low, big southerly coming in past Tasmania, and a new low forms in the Tasman. Not much going on in New Zealand on Monday though, fairly mild, west to northwest winds. We won't be seeing frost around as that blows on through. So Tuesday next week kind of looks like where we are right now. Another big low in the Tasman. Couple of important things to note though. The air pressure with this one next week, not as deep. Not as much energy, so not as much rain or wind with this one. And the other feature is this high pressure zone near Tasmania, sending a ridge of high pressure south of that low, cuts off that southerly feed. So that low might fall apart next week. Certainly worth keeping an eye on though, too far out to completely lock in. But good to see follow-up showers coming back in again to those very dry western parts of the country. 7-day rainfall. Okay, so the main areas of concern are in the yellow, gold, orange shading. So clearly, Nelson westwards, maybe not so much in Nelson itself, but certainly going off westwards, you're seeing those heavier falls there where over 200 millimeters is possible. But it's also worth pointing out places like Taranaki, around the volcanic plateau, Bay of Plenty, parts of Auckland. That's really important because Hanua dams, they need rain, and also parts of the far north. You're getting up to that 80 to 100, 120 millimeter mark. Again, hit and miss with those blobs of that heaviest rain coming through. Quite a few moving parts. And over in the east here, the pinks and the purples, that's the very bottom of the scale. So not much coming for eastern New Zealand. To be honest with you, that's quite a good weather map. It's balancing out where it's kind of gone wrong this year. So the east gets a chance to dry out a bit because some of the east is wetter than it should be, and the west desperately needs the rain, but we don't want too much of a good thing. And that might just be an issue in some places with the very dry soil, cracks in the ground that can lead to slips, and also very hard soil is like concrete. So if the rain's too heavy on it, just washes away like it would do on the roof or on a concrete. So we'll be watching this closely, keep up to date with those Met Service warnings and the watches. We'll be back again tomorrow, Thursday, as we break this down for you as it all starts to move on in. We'll see you then.